Well, good afternoon. I'd like to call to order our Middlesex County Council meeting to order for Tuesday, August the 11th. And I think that you will all agree with me that we are in the dog days of summer. It was great to have seen you and the staff last week when we got together for our special meeting with regards to our procedural bylaw, and then, of course, for our lunch afterwards. It's hard to believe that we're in month number 5 of COVID pandemic living. And you know, in some ways it's gone by so quickly, and in other ways it's just dragged on. When we were together last week, I was reminded about how stressful this situation has been on everyone. Getting together physically was so appreciated, I think, by everyone, and in many ways was more emotional than I expected. Our staff from top down needs to once again be reminded, or be commended, excuse me, that for the work that they have done the last 5 months. The work of Middlesex County has gone on without a stop, and our employees have remained safe. And I believe, and after speaking to many of them last week, have really felt that they are in a supportive environment. As we continue to say, we are taking a very deliberate and cautious approach, a controlled approach, one might say, as we move forward. We have no idea what the fall will look like, but of course, everyone's patience and understanding is appreciated, and we know that we're all supportive of everyone as we work through this. As I said, you know, our staff really needs to be congratulated on the work that they've done. And I want to just take a moment to specifically call out Lindsay and her team for the work that they have done within the library system and the programs that they have been able to keep going at a virtual level. This morning, the library board met, and we were updated on a number of the programs that they've done and how they have been able to cautiously reopen through curbside pickup, through appointments to use computers, and of course we're now starting to have all of the materials that were taken out in the winter returned to us. And you know, it hasn't been easy, but again, the whole library team has really stepped up. And maybe a specific shout out to the early on team. You know, engaging virtually, as we all know, as adults can be challenging. And as children, while we think that, you know, it's second nature to them to have now either tablets or phones or be in front of screens in today's age, trying to keep them all motivated and engaged on a screen platform without the physical contact that they're used to in participating in the early on programs has been a challenge. But you know, that team has done some wonderful things, and I know that in the days to come that Lindsay will be sharing some of that stuff with you, and I look forward to being able to do that as well. So congratulations, Lindsay, for all the work, and make sure that everybody knows that this council certainly appreciates everything that they've done the last 5 months. So, and as a final reminder, as unfortunately summer is winding down, keep your staycations local and remember to explore what's in your backyard. Middlesex County certainly has a lot to offer, and we're thrilled to be able to share some of that with you. Okay, moving on to the actual council meeting. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Okay, seeing none. Is there any business arising from the minutes that have been provided to you? Okay, we do have 2 sets of minutes in front of you for your approval. The council meetings held on July 14th, and then our special council meeting on July 28th. If I can get a mover and seconder for those, please. Councillor Warwick and Councillor Mayhew. And all opposed? And those are carried. We actually do have a deputation this afternoon, and it's wonderful that our friends from KPMG can be with us this afternoon. It's too bad we can't be in person, but this is the next best thing. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over and introduce Dylan Taylor from KPMG to present to us our 2019 audit report. Welcome, Dylan.
Good afternoon, actually, Warden Burkhart. I'm going to step in for just 1 second.
Great.
I am the familiar face, I think, to a lot of you, and Dylan is new, so I will take a moment to introduce him. You'll recall that Syed and I presented an audit plan back in the winter before we were forced to be remote as we are today. And in the meantime, unfortunately, Syed has left KPMG for the greener pastures, apparently, of Canada Life. But I am very pleased to introduce Dylan to you. He's a fantastic member of our team, has worked in the municipal space before and worked with me for many years now on several clients that we share in common. So I know that Cindy and Ewa and others have enjoyed working with Dylan, and we'll continue to do that in the years ahead. And Dylan's actually going to present the findings report. But before we get there, I want to make special thank you to Cindy and Ewa. For those of you who have listened to us present this report a few times now, this is the first audit of the county that has been done entirely remotely. I stopped in to grab 2 boxes of materials from Cindy and Ewa back in, I think that might have been February or early, no, it was probably end of March. And, you know, from a safe distance away, waved and said hello and thanks very much, I'll take those. And we have not seen one another, or our teams have not seen one another face to face since. And to be here in early August with an audit findings report that it's as good as it is from a you know, no issues, anything like that perspective. I'm proud of both of our teams for having done such a great job in an environment that nobody ever would have expected we'd be preparing an audit in. So it's worked well, we've communicated well, and pleased to be here to be able to present an audit findings report that doesn't look a lot different than it would have had we done the work in person. So I'll turn it over to Dylan, and please, you know, be sure to ask any questions you've got as we go through, and we'd be happy to respond to them.
Thanks, Ian.
Perfect. Thanks, Ian. Yeah, so I will walk through our audit findings report. I'm not sure if it'll be pulled up on the screen, but to follow along, I'll be using the page numbers in the bottom right corner of our findings report. There it is there. So I'll actually start down on what we've labeled as page 1, which is the executive summary. And we'll start by just noting that this findings report does build off of the audit plan that was presented to council, I believe, back in February. And there are no significant changes regarding our audit or the audit approach that was presented in that planning report. But the obvious difference is obviously that we did have to complete the audit remotely and that the COVID-19 pandemic was declared subsequent to year end. So we've included a note just for your information that the pandemic is considered a subsequent event to the financial statements. It was obviously something that arose in March. And so with the December year end, the only requirements in the financial statement for this are disclosure. There's no quantitative adjustments or anything that was required to be recorded. So there's just the disclosure note at the end of the financial statements. And we've completed our procedures over things like going concern and assess the impact on the county. And like I said, just disclosure requirements and no quantitative impact to the financial statements because of this. So in terms of finalizing the audit, this report was prepared a little over a week ago, about 2 weeks ago. So at that time we had one procedure regarding the census data used in the EFB valuation, the employee future benefits valuation. That's been completed at this time now. And so the remaining 3 items there are what we'll be working through today, and the signed representation letters will be received this week as well to allow us to finalize the audit. So I'll move on to page 2. We'll note that we are independent from the county. this audit findings report, and the audit opinion ultimately wouldn't mean a whole lot if we weren't. But we are independent, and there are no independence issues regarding the audit. Significant accounting policies and practices, no new initial selections or changes to any of the accounting policies this year, which is good. Uncorrected differences, we did not identify any differences that remain uncorrected in the financial statements. And control deficiencies, we did not identify any significant control deficiencies to bring to your attention as a result of our audit procedures. So continuing on with page 3 and 4, these are two of the required audit risks that we have to address and respond to in each audit we undertake. These were presented in the audit planning report, the first being a fraud risk from revenue recognition. We are able to rebut this risk in some of our audits, and we have rebutted it for the county audit, just due to the nature of the revenues that the county records and our ability to tie a majority of it back to government funding. The second required risk is our management override of controls on page 4. And this risk is not able to be rebutted, and so we are required in every audit we undertake to design procedures to address this risk. So that would include testing specific journal entries and other adjustments to the statements, reviewing estimates, and reviewing any significant unusual transactions. And as a result of these procedures this year, we did not have any issues and no significant findings to bring to your attention. Continuing on page 5, these are some of the areas that we highlighted in our planning report that we would be focusing on during our audit. The first one here being accounts receivable, deferred revenue, and revenue, just due to the significant nature of these amounts on the financial statements. And so we were able to carry out our procedures that we did present in our audit planning report, and no significant issues or significant findings as a result of those procedures. Similarly, we have accounts payable and expenses. Again, we were able to perform those procedures we included in our audit planning report, and no significant findings or issues as a result of those procedures. So continuing on page 6, the other two areas we highlighted in our planning report for you were the capital assets, the tangible capital assets. This is the most significant balance on the statement of financial position. So we specifically designed our procedures around testing additions, disposals, depreciation related to the tangible capital assets. And similarly, we were able to carry out those procedures and we did not have any significant findings. Lastly, here we have payroll and employee future benefits. This is an area that requires a little bit of expertise. We rely on management's actuary to perform valuation over those employee future benefit amounts in the financial statements. And so we were able to rely on the actuarial expert again this year that management used, Dixon Actuarial Services, resulting in the liability of $2.5 million at year end. And we were able to perform our procedures over the assumptions used by the actuary and ensure that all significant assumptions and disclosure requirements were adequately tested and included in the statements. So again, no significant findings there as a result of those procedures. Any questions at all on audit risks and results at this point?
I can't see everybody, so if somebody's got a question, maybe just chime in.
Madam Warden, we have Councillor Vanderhaden with a question.
Okay, go ahead, Joanne.
Thank you, through the warden. Just a quick question on the future benefits, because I don't know the value of that number. I know the value of that number was in my account, but I don't know the value of that number when it's attached to an organization. Is that a normal amount of future benefits on statements? I just need to know whether, I guess I'm not asking the question properly. I need to know whether that's a number that's doable, or if it's higher, or if it's lower, or that kind of thing.
So Councillor Vanderheiden, that number is directly correlated to a couple of things that will make it very different from one entity to the next. Headcount would be one, and the type of benefit is the other. So that number is very consistent year to year with what you've seen for the county in the past. You'll see the comparative was 2.1 million. It's always been in and around the $2 million number. Consistency really only gets changed by discount rates and all that are used, but it's not an unreasonable number for an organization of your size.
Thank you.
Perfect. Any other questions at this point? Hearing none, I'll move on to page 7 of our report, which is the financial statement presentation and disclosure. So we've assessed the form, arrangement, and content of the financial statements as adequate, and the application of accounting pronouncements issued but not yet effective was not applicable this year. There are no new accounting standards for public sector entities that were required to be disclosed in the statements this year. So page 8 is our uncorrected differences and corrected adjustments. As I mentioned off the top, there are no uncorrected differences that we identified, which were left out of the financial statements. And there are also no corrected adjustments this year that we identified and were included in the financial statements. So overall, just no differences that we identified, which speaks to Cindy and Yuwa and their team's preparedness this year, especially given the virtual environment we were all working in. So always wonderful to see those things. Lastly, we have the appendices for the report. They begin on page 9. Appendix 1 on page 10 is our required communications. So there is the auditor's report, which is included in the draft financial statements, and as well the management representation letter, which is included in this report as Appendix 3. Appendix 2 on the next page is just a high-level summary of audit quality and risk management, more for council's information purposes. I won't go through it in detail here. But Appendix 3, like I mentioned, is the management representation letter, which will be required to be signed and returned to us in order to finalize the audit. And then I'll quickly touch on Appendix 4, which is just an addition this year related to the COVID-19 pandemic and some resources for council, for management, for anyone who's interested in looking at them. There is a link in Appendix 4 there to KPMG's website in response to business implications and the response to the pandemic. So again, we've just included that for your informational purposes if you're interested in learning or reading more or seeing what KPMG can do to assist with any ongoing or issues. So that concludes the audit findings report. I'll pause again to see if anyone has any questions for myself or for Ian.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Dylan. Any questions on what has been presented to you at this time? Councillor Vanderheiden.
Thank you through the warden. I guess to Dylan, thank you for that report, and Ian, you as well. I really appreciated what you added at the end there, the COVID response and all the information to follow that, because that's the first thing that you started the report with, and that's the first thing that's on almost the first page. And because it really didn't affect the audit you were doing, but it's going to affect everything moving forward, it's good for us to have some kind of knowledge of where to head and what to do. So I just wanted to say thank you for that, because I think in all the different things that we do, it's good for us to at least get some of that knowledge in our heads. I'm sure there'll be other things that hiccup in between, but at least we've got some kind of a base. So thank you for that.
Joanne, any other comments or questions for the KPMG team? Okay, so seeing none, I'll just echo what Joanne said. I want to thank you for the work that you've done. And, you know, Ian, you summed it up so well at the beginning about how it worked so well and seamless, and proud of both teams. And I think we would all agree with that. So thanks very much for everybody's efforts the last few months in the work that's been done.
Great. Thank you, Madam Warden.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay. You're welcome to stay and watch, but you know, I would say that if you were here in person, but
It's going to get really exciting now that the audit stuff's done.
Thanks, Billy. I'll stream it on YouTube.
That's
Yeah,
right.
attaboy. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thanks
Thank
very
you, everyone.
much. Okay, so moving on, any inquiries or notices of motion? Okay, reports, none. Into new business. And we've got a report from Chief Roberts with regards to cross-border billing. And I will pass it over to you, Chief.
Perfect. Thank you, Warden. Can everyone hear me? Yeah, perfect. So good afternoon through you, Warden, to members of council. A bit of background. One of the principles within the EMS system in Ontario that was developed through legislation, especially with the uploading, was the seamless delivery of services by the closest available ambulance to emergency calls, regardless of the municipal geographic boundaries. And as a result, as council well knows, there are occasions where responses are provided in our municipality and our coverage area by paramedic providers that are operated and funded by another municipality. Cross-border billing agreements are in place between neighboring paramedic services within Western Ontario and, for the most part, throughout Ontario. And the costing of this is calculated through a fixed setup of costs that was originally formed and determined by the single tier and regional treasurers group. During the period of 2011 to 2012, cross-border agreements were negotiated with all services within Western Ontario, and these agreements were for a 10-year period, which are scheduled to terminate at the end of 2020. And Middlesex County was one of those municipalities that signed off. The province of Ontario previously had legislation requiring that municipalities enter into an agreement for cross-border compensation for calls completed in neighboring municipalities. Middlesex London Paramedic Service fulfilled those requirements along with Middlesex County and entered into agreements with Elgin County, Essex County, Huron County, Oxford County, and Perth County. And these cross-border agreements, as I've mentioned earlier, are scheduled to expire December 31st, 2021. Since that time, the province of Ontario repealed this requirement and no longer mandates municipalities to be bound by cross-border agreements and payments. The legislation requiring this was repealed by the government several years ago. Given that the province operates, and especially its dispatch center, under a seamless delivery system, the closest ambulance will always be dispatched to a call, regardless of the boundaries and regardless of whether or not there is a cross-border agreement in place. And the current cross-border agreements, as council will be aware, come at a cost to Middlesex County and provide no change to the deployment of ambulances from neighboring municipalities. But since the legislation has changed such that cross-border billing agreements are no longer required. Simply put is that given that, and in our past briefing, that the county does not control our dispatch center, we do not control the movements of neighboring county paramedic services into our area, but the county of Middlesex is required to be billed for those calls. A bit of an analysis. On March the 2nd, 2020, Middlesex London Paramedic Service received notification from Oxford County on a cross-border bill for 2019. This bill was reviewed and found to be valid. The supporting documentation was included, and the amount owing to Oxford County from Middlesex County was in the amount of $26,733. A report was presented to the authority board, and it was recommended and approved for payment. At that time, the Authority Board recommended that a report be presented to Middlesex County Council for direction on the cross-border billing issue, thus the report today. I would draw your attention to County Council through the Warden that Section 5 of the agreement that is in place states that this agreement may be terminated at any time by either party upon 60 days notice, written notice, to either party if there is a material change of legislation or funding of either party's intermunicipal land ambulance service by the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care or the successor. The options that were discussed by the Authority Board and are before County Council in this report for consideration by County Council are A, to maintain the current agreement and required payments until the end of the contract, which is December 31st, 2021. Extend the current agreement past December 31st, 2021 when it expires, or notify all Western Ontario municipalities that Middlesex County is exercising Section 5 of the current agreement and serving notice to terminate. So through you, Madam Warden, to members of council, the recommendation is that Middlesex County proceed with continuation, extension, or termination of the current cross-border agreements with Elgin, Essex, Huron, Oxford, and Perth County. And so I would put it back to you, Madam Warden, for any questions that County Council may have on this report.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Neil. Any questions on this discussion? Councillor DeVete, did you have your hand up? So I think I see Councillor DeVete, Councillor Brennan, do you have your hand up? And then Councillor Vanderheyden. So we'll go in that order. So Ina.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions through you to the chief. Thank you for that report. I'm wondering about in the new regime, how are costs recouped? So under the Section 5 agreement, I know that typically we pay out more than we receive from others, but I'm just wondering what that is. And then I'm wondering, under the restructuring that has started and isn't finished in the province, how is this going to affect things moving forward? So I guess I'm wondering about our exposure and or how we might have to pay for things, or how we would so I guess both sides of the coin, who pays and who receives going forward under the new regime, and also how that's, what your idea is about how that might look, if you have an idea at all at this point in time.
Through you, Madam Warden. So I think the first question was if, and correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor DeVete, if the county decides to exercise Clause 5, Section 5, the early termination, how are the costs recovered? The reality is that all municipal paramedic services in the province are funded up to 50% by the province. So one could argue that they're already funded to provide that service, and there's no additional extra billing. And so it's already part and parcel of it. So there is, unless they're putting on additional resources, there is no net loss to the municipality. Certainly there are services throughout the province that are incurring other services coming in, especially in Eastern Ontario is probably one of the more predominant, where the service is not providing any revenue to the neighboring services that are providing service within the city. Ottawa, I will be honest, is the example that's been in the media over the years. So they have no cross-border agreements, and they don't reciprocate on funding. The second part of your question was the modernization impact that's currently underway. I really couldn't probably comment very far on that because I'm not sure at this point in time what the findings will be of it, but certainly municipalities are funded at 50%, and certainly the seamlessness of dispatch, making sure that the closest ambulance responds to the call will continue, whether or not there is a cross-border agreement in place or not. And the argument is that it's up to the municipality to ensure that the appropriate resources are in place, and then to submit the funding request to the province for funding at up to 50%, which is done every year.
Thank you for that.
Okay. Councillor Brennan.
Through you, Madam Warden, to Chief Roberts. First of all, whether we have an agreement or not, the closest ambulance is still going to be responding, and building will pay. So there's really no reason not letting everybody gets the service that's required. So is there any reason why we shouldn't extend the contract?
So through you, Warden, to Councillor Brennan. So that certainly is up to council. If council doesn't extend the contract or continue the contract until 2021, that's not going to impact the closest vehicle being dispatched. Certainly at times we do see, and we've had some challenges in the past where dispatch is dispatching a code 3, which is not an emergency call per se. When I say that, not a lights and sirens call, from or giving it to a neighboring municipality that's in the City of London when we had vehicles available. So you're already paying on one hand for vehicles to service that call, and yet dispatch may be at times assigning it to a neighboring here on Oxford Elgin to do the call, and so you're now having to pay for them as well. I'm not sure if I've addressed your question,
Okay,
Councillor.
so yeah, I think that's a concern then if they're dispatching ambulances to code 3 calls where we could be handling those ourselves, and we're virtually paying for them twice. Is there some way that can be stopped, or is it just at the dispatcher's discretion whether they dispatch another outside ambulance to a call or not?
So through you, Warden, to Councillor Brand. So in the past, we have raised those issues because obviously a code 3 doesn't require the closest vehicle. It's still an emergency call, even though there's no lights and sirens. But a vehicle can go, but a code 4 is it requires the closest vehicle to respond with lights and sirens. But again, because we do not control the dispatch center and they operate under the authority assigned to them by the Minister of Health, we could raise an issue, but ultimately it's up to the dispatcher's discretion at the time. So this is one of the challenges over the past when we talked about a unified dispatch system, of having the dispatch under our system where we can control the resources and at times some of the expenses that are being attributed to Middlesex County.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Brennan. Okay, Councillor Vanderheyden.
Thank you. One thing just for clarification, and this is on the list of numbers for the years. What does AP stand for? AP setup. That's one thing.
Through you, Warden, to Councillor Vanderheyden, and I know the treasurer's with me as well on this one. I believe accounts payable would be AP, the designation.
Very easy answer. Just when I read it, I thought, I don't know what that means. Maybe there's something special going on there that I don't know about. Sorry, follow-up question. And I had the same questions in mind as Councillor DeVee had, because the recommendation says we can either proceed with continuation, extension, or termination. And I'm not sure that I know which one we need to do, what's best for Middlesex County. I really, from the report, which is a good report, but I don't know which one to pick from that list, just saying.
Any comment on that, Chief?
Again, certainly the options through your Warden to Councillor Vanderheyden, the options are before you, and we didn't want to make a recommendation, but we wanted to be able to provide County Council with the available options to you. Obviously, there is an agreement in place, but the agreement in place was done so at a time when legislation was in place, and since that time, the legislation was repealed by the province. And I believe part of the reason why it was repealed was because the province committed to a true 50-50. When prior to that, the 50-50 was below that, and there was ongoing issues that were raised provincially. So I think that was part of the considerations. But certainly over the last couple of years, we have received from one municipality upwards of 7 years back billing, which was again against the agreement, and that was not paid. But clearly, it is something that, for the most part, we're only receiving it right now from Oxford County, and we have not received it other than yesterday. We did receive from one other municipality, which again was 3 months past the deadline for submission. We're not receiving it from any other municipality. So we wanted, as per the Authority Board's discussion, to present Council with the options and with an update on this matter for your consideration.
Councillor Warwick.
I
Is
think
that okay, Joanne?
I think Bill wanted to say something. He was waving his hands
Yep.
around.
Yep, I'll get to him.
No, what I was going to comment on was, you know, regardless of the billing opportunities back and forth between the counties, it's the service I'm mostly concerned about. When you live on a corner of Middlesex County, which I do, and Middlesex is huge, vast, and you're waiting for an ambulance to come, you know, we have different events where, you know, say a horse show, for example, where someone's falling off and you're waiting. A lot of times those ambulances are coming from Oxford because they're the closest. And our Middlesex ones are tied up. And I just worry when we start talking about changing service agreements that the people that need it on the edges of the counties are going to be suffering for that. I'm just wondering if there's any comment to that. It just seems that we need Oxford in Middlesex because of that.
Through you, Madam Warden, to Councillor Warwick. So at the end of the day, whether or not you have a cross-border agreement in place or do not, the services such as Oxford County, or whether it be Elgin or Huron County, they will be dispatched to the call if they are the closest, irregardless of a cross-border agreement. The agreement really is just the ability for the parties to bill each other. It does not, if you do not have an agreement, it does not stop the closest ambulance, whether it be Oxford, from coming into Town Centre. That is a provincial seamless directive, which remains in place even after the cross-border billing requirement by the province was repealed. So that continues today, and that is the law.
Okay, and just to follow up, so if the service stays the same, why would we change our ability to bill somebody and recoup money? I mean, that seems to me the most important part is that, you know, we would want to keep things so that we can receive money and recoup some of our money back.
Through you, Madam Warden, to Councillor Warwick, the reality is that Middlesex paramedic service, or Middlesex County, actually is on the receiving end of paying, not really billing. And part of that is because we are a central receiving center in Southern Ontario because of London Health Sciences. Vehicles come into the city with patients from whether it be Windsor or other areas. When they're in here, then dispatch at times will assign them to a call. And a good example I remember years ago is that we had available units at Victoria campus, and there was a call across at Parkwood, and we had available units to go. It was a code 3. And I think it was an Oxford County vehicle was sent. And we raised the question is, why did you send Oxford when we had available units right across the street? And the comment from the dispatcher is, that's my prerogative, and I decided to keep you available in case I wanted you. So on one hand, because we're such a large receiving area with all these vehicles coming in, typically we are on the receiving end of getting the bill, not sending a bill. And that's one of the challenges of being a large area, plus also not controlling the movement of vehicles within our area.
Thank you.
Okay, before I get Bill, and I see your hands back up, Councillor Javid, I just want to clarify. So the province repealed having to have these agreements in place between neighbors, and they no longer, so we're no longer required to have to bill. But I guess if there's an agreement in place, then that supersedes the province repealing that requirement.
Again, through you, Madam Warden, I'm not the lawyer here, but you do have a binding agreement that is in place with an exit clause, Section 5. So unless that would be exercised, I believe that the parties would be subject to that.
Okay, and then just one more question. So we have not received notice from any of our neighbors to pull back the agreement.
Through you, Madam Warden, that is correct.
Okay, all right. Bill.
I'm not afraid to take a swipe at Joanne's question about, you know, what she was saying, I'm not really sure what to do and looking for a little guidance, I think. If it was me and I was on county council, I would say to our neighbors that we're going to do this for the rest of this year and then end them at the end of this year. That's what I would do, for the simple fact that since the time we put those agreements in place, both the legislative framework's changed as well as the financial framework has changed. A lot of municipalities have adjusted to the new reality of what cross-border billing responsibilities are. Our responsibilities are pretty clear. It won't affect service levels in any way, to Allison's point. And so the decision would be to have a nicely worded letter to our neighbors explaining that we're ending those agreements in accordance with the terms of those agreements.
But for December 31st, 2020, as opposed to 2021.
That's what I would do, just for the politics of it.
Yeah. Councillor David, did you have, I saw your hand up a minute ago.
Thank you, Warden. It's a question through you to the chief again. I think I was making an assumption by looking at the summary of the payments and the accounts payable, that back and forth there on the last 2 pages. My assumption was that these are items that we had to pay. Is it safe to assume that we have neighbors to whom we might have to pay who didn't bill us?
Through you, Warden, to Councillor DeVete, that is correct. We, over the past couple of years, have not received bills from several municipalities. So while these agreements are in place, as you can see through that list, the majority are not billing us. So
just a second, that's not what she asked. She said, is it possible we haven't received bills from places where we would have to pay? And
no, sorry,
that's what you said, and that's unlikely that there would be any municipality around us that we would have to pay, but there are likely, to Neil's point, places that may not have submitted bills where there is a balance owing to those municipalities. It is that is likely.
Okay.
Right, any other follow-up comments, questions? Councillor Ropp.
Thank you, Madam Warden. On listening to everyone, I have to say that I am in favor of terminating the agreement at the end of the year. After the conversation we've had today and also at the authority board, given the legislation and the way the funding is set up, the province is already paying the 50% of the funding, and I am in favor of termination of this at the end of the year.
Thank you. Councillor Vanderheyden.
Well, then I will make the recommendation, a motion to say that we, at the end of the year, I guess that's the timeline, whichever the appropriate timeline is, to terminate this agreement. And it can be written up the way it needs to be legally, and I would make that motion.
And that's for the agreements with all of our neighbors, correct? Okay, is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Ropp. Any other further comment or questions? Okay, seeing none, the motion's on the floor, and I know that Kathy will clerk it up to make sure that it's worded properly, but I think we all understand what Councillor Vander Hayden's getting at, and so all opposed to that motion. And that's carried. Thank you very much. Maybe while we're kind of talking ambulance, Bill, did you want to talk about the funding announcement that was we got word on?
Sure. I gave council an email update on the good news from the province yesterday in regard to that we finally received our announcement for the budget for this year in August, and that's great that we got it. And but new news as of this morning, just about the broader context provincially, not just Middlesex. Neil, do you want to relay that story?
Sure. Thanks, Bill. And through you, Madam Warden, to members of council, I was on a call earlier today with Minister Elliott's office and received further briefing on the provincial funding envelope for land ambulance services for 2020. So overall, there was a 4.9% increase over 2019. That's for the whole province. Of that, there was an additional $31.5 million more than was expended in 2019. And again, that certainly supports the minister's commitment and the premier's commitment last year to enhanced growth in 2020. And certainly what I've been advised is that Minister Elliott was a strong supporter at the cabinet table to ensure that land ambulance services, especially for 2020, were getting the appropriate increase and the appropriate funding that is necessary to continue the work that they do each and every day. So it's extremely good news, far more than we had budgeted for. And certainly I think our increase, Cindy had done it, was in excess of 5%. So we even surpassed the provincial sector overall increase as well. So it's good news.
And Warden, I think you will remember that last February, we thought we were going to be in a situation where we would have a budget cut of significant proportions along with a 2-year lag. Then in August, we heard differently at AMO that there might be a budget cut plus, but staying at a 1-year lag. We're still at a 1-year lag, and that's okay, but this is welcome news. So you can, if you follow the timelines along of the information we're getting from the province, this is a long ways away from where we were last February. And I think a lot of credit goes to Minister Elliott for fighting for that funding around the cabinet table, and good for her. And we'll be drafting a letter for your signature, Warden, on thanking her and congratulating her for her efforts.
No. We all agree with that statement. I just want to make this clarification. So this is just the regular funding announcement that we expect every year, and it has nothing to do with COVID. There's no COVID money in there.
Well, okay, you go ahead, Neil.
Actually, that is my understanding, Warden, that the COVID pot of money is separate and distinct. That was I think $77 million, and that has yet to be approved and allocated out to services throughout the province.
Thanks.
Yeah, so that, just to put a fine point on that, or a finer point on that, this isn't considered to be one-time type of funding that might go away. It's their broader annual allocation, which is, I think, what you were saying.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, moving on. Councillor comments and other business. Okay, moving on to bylaws. If there's no comments, Kathy.
We just have one bylaw, a bylaw to confirm proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the County of Middlesex for August the 11th, 2020.
Okay, can I get a mover and seconder for the first and second reading of that? Councillor Richards and Councillor DeVitt. And all opposed? That's carried. And then a mover and seconder for the third and final reading, please. Councillor Elliott and Councillor Smith. All opposed? And that's carried. I don't think we need a recess. Moving on to the Committee of the Whole. Delegations and reports of county officers, we have none, but our action items, we do. The 2019 consolidated financial statements, and that would be Cindy.
Thanks, and through the warden. Attached are the draft audited consolidated financial statements for Middlesex County. These statements were prepared in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. The consolidated financial statements include the consolidated statement of financial position, the consolidated statement of operation, the consolidated statement of change in net financial assets, and the consolidated statement of cash flows. As you heard from KPMG earlier, the only new note would be the one related to COVID-19. So subsequent to December 31st, 2019, the COVID-19 outbreak was declared a pandemic. The County of Middlesex was able to respond quickly and make operational changes, including allowing staff to work from home where possible and provide services by phone, email, or virtually. The county and all levels of government face the possibility of significant financial and operational impacts. However, at this time, an estimate on the financial impact is not feasible. At this time, I recommend that the 2019 consolidated financial statements for the County of Middlesex be approved. I'd also like to say thanks to my finance staff for all their hard work on the audit and preparing these statements. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Cindy. And yes, I think we will all join you in thanking your staff for being able to do all this in the times that we find ourselves in. Is there any questions or comments for Cindy on the statements? Councillor Vanderheyden.
Just a comment more than anything. I just want to say thank you for the way this is all listed and the way it's combined and put together, because it was a very easy read. I mean, I'm not a financial expert, so it's nice to be able to, you know, go through this piece by piece and see what's there and have a better view of exactly where we're standing. So I just want to say thank you for that. And I also back to that COVID piece. I mean, we don't any of us know in our own communities where we're going to be sitting. And we're all watching every quarter to see where we're at and what's happening. But I guess until we do a final audit for the next year and see where we're going and how things change, I guess we won't have those answers. So I appreciate that comment as well.
Okay, any other questions, comments for Cindy? Okay, seeing none, there is a recommendation in front of you. If I can get a mover and seconder for that acceptance, please. Councillor Warwick and Councillor Cornelissen. And all opposed? And that's carried, thank you. Again, from Cindy, the 2019 trust financial statements.
Again, thanks through the warden. Attached are the draft audited trust financial statements for the County of Middlesex. Again, these statements were prepared in accordance with our generally accepted accounting principles. These statements have two components. One is the Strathmere Lodge and the funds held on behalf of the residents of the lodge. And the second is the library and the amounts donated to the library. At this time, I recommend that the 2019 trust financial statements for the County of Middlesex be approved. And again, be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions on this report for Cindy? Okay, seeing none, there is also a recommendation, if I can get a mover and seconder for that one. Councillor Richards and Councillor Brennan. All opposed? And that's carried. And the 2019 surplus report, Cindy.
Sorry, thanks, I had to unmute there. Through the warden, attached to the 2019 surplus report. The year-end operating surplus, and I'm glad to say there was a surplus again, was $471,129. And consistent with previous years, I am recommending that this surplus be transferred to the tax rate stabilization reserve. And I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Cindy. And any questions on this one? Okay, so a mover and seconder for that recommendation, please. Councillor Smith and Councillor Mayhew. All opposed? And that's carried. Moving on to the winter maintenance service agreement for with Lambton County, a report from Chris.
Thank you, Madam Warden. Have to start thinking about winter now. I know it doesn't seem like it with the weather we're having lately. I'll keep it fairly brief. We've had a winter maintenance agreement with Lambton County for decades. It's been a great working relationship between our municipalities. Basically, we just create a system by which we balance off roads that extend into each other's counties, just so we're not turning around our snow plows at sort of an imaginary boundary line. We want to make sure we keep our roads clean and safe for all of our travelers along our county roads. And this is a cost neutral agreement for us. So you can see it's a little longer than our normal terms of agreement for another 10 years, but we have done these for 10 years in the past. And Lambton is certainly interested in engaging with us in this agreement again. So I'm recommending that the agreement be approved and the warden and clerk be authorized to sign on our behalf. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks for that, Chris. Any questions for Chris on this agreement? Okay, seeing none, can we get a mover and seconder for that? Councillor Warwick and Councillor Mayhew. All opposed? And that's carried. Okay, correspondence and information items. General payables to July 31st, 2020, totaling $271,937.69. Planning payables to July 31st, 2020, totaling $2,164.49. Electronic payments for the month of July 2020 totaling $2,294,753.37. Social service payables to July 31st, 2020 totaling $177,356.29. Strathmere Lodge payables to July 31st, 2020, totaling $149,089.05. Road payables to July 31st, 2020, totaling $3,996,268.05. MLPS payables to July 31st, 2020, totaling $890,966.28. ITS payables to July 31st, 2020, totaling $131,256.89. Economic development payables to July 31st, 2020, totaling $51,487.21. Okay, and a mover and seconder to receive those for information, please. Councillor Richards and Councillor DeVete. All opposed? And those are carried. Thank you. Strathmere Lodge Family, Friend, and Responsible Party newsletter for August 2020. Councillor Vanderheyden.
Yes, through the warden to Brent. How's it going with the COVID response? I see you've got a whole bit there about what people are going to be doing, visiting outside and inside. And I've heard nothing but good from residents here that I've talked to, but I just thought maybe you could update us on how that's working for everyone.
Certainly, through the warden. Visitors are coming in droves, mostly for outside visits. In July, the province changed the rules, so visitors do not have to have a COVID test to visit outside. They do need to have a negative test result to come inside. And so the majority of the people are choosing not to go through with that swab up the nose, if you will, and choosing the outdoor visit. So a lot of outdoor visits, actually not a lot of indoor visits.
On the one hand, that's good because then the residents are getting fresh air too.
Yeah, it's a win-win. Okay, thanks for that, Brent. Strathmere Lodge Census Report for June 2020. Oh, did you have another question, Allison?
No,
Or
just-
Councillor
sorry,
Warwick?
Curtis was waving his hand.
Oh.
And
Thanks. Sorry, Councillor
No,
Smith.
that's okay. Through the warden, I'll just add. So my grandma is a resident of Strathmere as of, I guess, a month and a half ago. She went through her 14 days of quarantine on her own, and now with the outdoor visits, it's quite enjoyable to go and visit with her. And between myself, my sisters, my dad, and my aunt, we're trying to keep her busy with kind of every day or every other day of being able to visit her. And it's good to see all the other residents out there as well visiting with their family as well. And a neat story that I heard was when my aunt was there visiting with my grandma, she saw a resident, and I believe it was their daughter was playing Yahtzee. And that's a game that you can play without actually touching. You have, you 2 sets of dice, whatever else, and you don't need to, that cross-contamination of holding cards, whatever it is. So it was neat to see people adapting to different ways to spend their time together. So I agree, Joanne, they're doing an excellent job at Strathmere. So just wanted to share that story.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Councillor Smith. Okay, Strathmere Lodge Census Report for June 2020. Councillor Vanderheyden.
Yeah, thank you. I don't ask too many questions on this report usually, Brent, but because of COVID, I see that we have, occupancy numbers of 160, and yet we only have 148 residents. Am I reading that correctly? So is there, and we've got a wait list. So is it just taking a longer time to fill the vacancies, or is it because of COVID? I'm just wondering why we're not filling all the beds.
Yes, through the warden. So yeah, we're not getting a lot of cases being presented to us by the LIND. It's going very slowly. We're probably doing an admission or 2 every week. So I think we'll slowly build that number up to a fuller capacity. But at the moment, things are pretty slow referral wise.
Okay, Joanne. Okay, moving on. Memo from the Ministry of Long-Term Care with respect to the Independent Long-Term Care COVID-19 Commission. Budget variance report for June 30th, 2020. City of London quarterly housing report. Councillor Cornelissen.
Thank you. To the warden. Cindy, in looking at that, the extended budget forecast appears to be increasing significantly, with the majority of those resources will be probably applied to the City of London. My question is, how is the county's portion established? Is it a percentage or is it a per unit? I asked this question as a board member, but I was never really given a clear answer.
Through the warden to the councillor. Our funding is actually through our agreements. Is that what you're asking about? How much the county actually pays according to our budget? So it's a combination of use of actual units and our weighted assessment.
Right, but with all these resources that they're going to be increasing, like the staffing and the regeneration and the Housing Development Corporation, the majority of those dollars will be spent in the City of London, although the county contributes to them. How was the county's portion established, given that that these funds are being spent in the city?
Okay, yeah, sorry about that. Now I understand your question, and that's a great question. And I think that's what we're trying to get answered. So Dirk, Chris, and myself met with some of the representatives from the housing in the City of London to try to arrange a meeting to come to County Council. At this point, we're probably looking maybe in October to be able to have that presentation and them to come. We've been asking some of those questions just in regards to how much is being spent in the county, where that's being spent in the county. So we're trying to still work with them around how we can do a presentation, or even if I have to put some slides together as part of that presentation to be able to respond to that question.
Okay. The very direct answer to your question, Adrian, is that City of London is the CMSM for social housing, and they make all the decisions related to how that funding is allocated. Our job is to pay the bill, and we do based upon the agreement that we have, but the City of London makes all of the decisions related to how that funding is allocated, if any dollars are spent in the county. And that's very similar to land ambulance, where we are the CMSM and county council makes the decisions related to how that funding is distributed. We try to, obviously, what we do is we take a fiduciary approach to land ambulance at the county, and we worry about the entire system and don't consider municipal boundaries. But we are, our only check and balance on that is on social housing is we have asked for the representatives from the city to come and talk to us about where they plan on spending that funding. That's what Cindy referred to in October. We did have a management oversight committee meeting with the folks from social housing. I guess it's probably a month or so ago now, where we did ask some initial questions, but there's a lot more questions that council is going to need, including probably a long list of ones you have about direct expenditures in the county, not only this year for this budget year, but also the 5-year forecast for where they plan to go in terms of spending.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Adrian. Councillor Javid.
The other part of that, oh, sorry, thanks for that update and explanation, Cindy. I'm just going to jump back in time a bit when you and I were chatting about a particular situation with a resident in my municipality. And my question to you was, well, okay, I can understand that housing might have to be sort of consolidated in certain areas, at least at some point in time, based on the fact that the city has this kind of population. And that might be an explanation why certain fixtures and assets aren't located in our municipalities out in the rural areas. I guess my question to you at that point was, well, then I would think that there are a number of beds allocated to county residents who need a place to live. And at that point, I think it's polite to say that the answer was negative. There wasn't any idea that there might be a proportion of space allocated to people in our communities to have a place to stay in the event that they became homeless or needed help of some kind. So I think that's, as Bill said, that the list of questions and the way of approaching this and the answers that we need to get are, I think, long and varied. And I guess the difference for me in my mind is the province does some dispatching to addresses, and people who need help get it, regardless of who actually does the budget and pays the bills when it comes to ambulance. I don't see any of that transparency here.
Well, Madam Warden, the other big difference, just to add on to what Councillor DeVite's saying, I don't remember the year, Ina, so you're going to have to forgive me, but in a previous administration of social housing, we actually did get numbers about last known address for people in social housing units in Middlesex and London. And I was shocked because there's a large percentage of social housing units in the county. There was, I don't have recent updates. We've asked for that information. But the last time we got that information, there was a large percentage of last known address for residents that were actually from London in county social housing units. And the rationale I was given for that, and again, it's one system, so that's okay. There's not any allocation of housing units, as you quite correctly pointed out, but it didn't make sense to me. I couldn't figure out why that was the case, but the demand was so high for social housing units in urban centers that it does make sense, because the further you get away from those urban centers for those social housing, the demand and the waiting lists were a lot shorter. And so there was a large number of folks from London that were in county social housing units back when we got that information before. The other thing that was of interest is that this isn't just a Middlesex London issue. Social housing is available to people in other counties as well in our area. And so at the time, there was a large number of last known addresses, not from the city or the county. And it struck me at the time that London and Middlesex is a catchment area for a large number of adjacent counties for homelessness, hostels, and then social housing for the region. And so it's a regional entity. In the GTA, in the Toronto area, when that happens, there's GTA pooling, and all the regions pay towards the pooling costs associated with that. So that Toronto doesn't have to bear those costs, because it's a big driver of social service costs that are coming from the region. And Toronto shouldn't have to be the sole payer for all of that. And we don't have pooling in this area, but certainly Middlesex London is a regional center for hospitals, social services, all the different types of services that we mentioned, and you draw from counties, not just Middlesex and London.
Councillor Vanderheyden.
Thank you, through the warden. Well, one is a comment, and when I read this, I read it quite carefully, because I do believe there's things that are not really quite in my mind appropriate. And it starts right off about saying the impact to the housing stability system because of COVID. So I mean, not even just a regular impact, but more impact because of COVID. And it says right in there, and I quote, "In response, there have been concerted efforts to prioritize and intensify our work within the Housing Stability Action Plan." Yet when you go over to Affordable Housing Community Improvement Plan, everything's been delayed. Like they're not putting any money into it. They're not there. There's money there, and it says twice in this report that they're not moving that forward yet because of COVID. Meanwhile, there's the need, but they're not moving any of this forward. Twice it says that in this report, and I'm thinking, well, that doesn't make any sense to me. When there's increased need, that you wouldn't move forward with as many projects as you could in order to facilitate the need there. So that's just a comment, and that just is disconcerting to me. The other thing that's talks about in here is the housing and the tenants and the eviction suspension and that sort of thing from the province. Now, I know I've had calls myself even yesterday from landowners, people that have bought property for investment and they're renting it out to people, and they can't evict anyone, even when people are not even on the lease. The tribunals aren't meeting very regularly. Like everything seems to be on hold, and it's becoming a real mess because we've got squatters, we've got all kinds of things like that. So I don't know where we go for help for that kind of thing. So I don't know if anybody can answer that, because that's a little bit off to the side, but it is in this report. So I just thought I would ask.
Okay, I don't know, Cindy, is that something that you can respond to, or maybe get information to Councillor Vanderheyden?
Definitely, I can't respond to that today, but I will get back to the councillor with some information.
Councillor Elliott.
Yes, through you, Warden, and I share a lot of the concerns that have already been raised. But one comment I just want to make is my disappointment with the City of London and the fact that, they had concerns with the ambulance budget. They asked for our staff to come and present information. Our CAO went in December and gave a very lengthy presentation on the ambulance budget. We've had questions regarding housing, and we have been asking for months now for them to come to present. I know as Cindy and I have been having conversations, I've been sending my questions to her, and I know she's been trying to bring City of London staff to our meetings to present and answer these questions. And now that we're hearing, maybe they'll be here in October, it's just a little frustrating when, we jumped at their request to get more information, and it seems like we're having to wait and wait and wait. And I just want to express my disappointment in that.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Elliott. I would probably, well, not probably, I do. I echo those same concerns that we don't have a date from them, and there doesn't seem to be any urgency on their end or to come and have a discussion with us. And I guess I would also be a little concerned with in your remarks, Cindy, and you having to provide slides for their presentation. That is a little bit interesting to me. Anyways, moving on. Any other comments or questions on that one? Okay, minutes of the Middlesex Economic Resiliency Task Force meeting held on June 24th, 2020. Middlesex London Board of Health updates for June and July 2020. Letter from the Ministry or the Minister of Environment with respect to the next steps for the Made in Ontario Environment Plan. Letter from Ontario Barn Preservation to all municipalities with respect to barns having significant cultural heritage and therefore worthy of long-term conservation. Councillor Smith.
Through the warden to Dirk, just wondering if this is going to be taken into consideration when we're looking at our official plan review, which I believe we're doing that right now, kind of behind the scenes with your planning staff.
Yes, through the warden. Yeah, agricultural issues, that is one of the research papers that we're working on. And so we'll take this into account. It's I'll just maybe quickly comment. It is an interesting letter and there's some good points in it. There are some that I'm not sure I would completely agree in terms of, you know, minimum distance separation compliance and some of those things. So I'm not sure it's 100% factual or meets the legislation, but we will certainly take it into account. And probably what I can do is one of those reports will reference this and kind of tell you about the areas where it is and is not in line with the provincial direction on it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Notice from the Ontario Energy Board with respect to an application by Enbridge Gas Incorporated to a natural gas increase effective January 1st, 2021. Media release from WOWC entitled "The Western Ontario Wardens Caucus Takes Action to Support Rural Broadband," dated July 20th, 2020. Memo from the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority advising that it moved to level 1 low water condition. Information on FCM's 2020 virtual election, key dates and what to expect. And Joanne, I think that you might have a comment with regards to this.
Thank you, Madam Warden. I do. I spoke to FCM today. We're getting ready for this virtual election. We've never done this before. It's just like everyone else, everything's new. So that the dates are there and we will need to have everyone register in order to do this. So I'll keep you informed of the information as it comes along because all my nomination papers and resolution is all there. But how this will go for myself, I registered as a nomination for first vice president. If I should lose that election, I will use that resolution to still run for the board. And then I would just run for the Ontario caucus. I hope that doesn't happen, but I needed a backup to make sure that I had everything covered just in case. It doesn't usually happen when you're running for first. It usually happens when you're running for third, where someone will run against you and then you could lose that election, but you still want to be involved. So that's how that will work, but I will absolutely keep everybody informed on how this moves forward. The nomination deadline is coming up. And as you see, the director elections are first, and that's exactly the reason they do that, is so that at the annual meeting, if you've lost your election in that one, you can still run for your provincial caucus. So that's how come they're separate. And I guess that's really all I can give you right now. But thank you for your support. Really appreciate it.
Great, thanks for that, Joanne. So just to confirm, you'll send out, we'll be getting the updates as to how we register, but you keep us apprised of that because we certainly want to make sure that we can get our votes in to support you for that. AMO updates on COVID-19 from July 13th to July 30th, 2020. AMO conference updates. 3 ministers' forums are better than 1. And I guess we'll find that out next week. WOWC newsletter with respect to building the future, rural infrastructure and regional economic development in teeny tiny summit goes virtual. Big ideas for small spaces. Councillor Vanderheyden.
I read this yesterday and I just wanted to point out that the first one is tomorrow, Wednesday the 12th. And so I don't know if anybody, I didn't see this advertised anywhere else. So I really didn't catch that till just when I read it yesterday. Tomorrow it's from 10:30 till noon. And then the next one is Wednesday the 23rd. So if anybody wants to attend the Teeny Tiny Summit, you need to register for that by calling that number. I'm sure you've all seen that, but I just wanted to highlight that because sometimes you slide over the report, and if you didn't catch that, then we don't want you to miss out.
Thanks, Councillor Vanderheyden. Just on that, Kara, I don't know whether you've got any information on that. If you register for it, are they going to be uploading the conference so that, you know, tomorrow from 10:30 to noon, if you can't make that, are they going to make that available to watch if you register?
Through you, Warden, I would expect that that will be the case. When we hosted last year, we did post all of the presentations online following and shared that with all registrants. So I would expect the same, even though they're going to a virtual platform.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay, AMO updates entitled Child Care Funding and Community Safety Initiatives, dated August 7th, 2020. Letter from the Ministry of Transportation announcing the province will be introducing a new regulatory framework which sets out evidentiary rules to govern school bus stop arm camera programs. I see Chris shaking his head. He looks like he's supportive of this. Thumbs up, yep. Okay, can we get a mover and seconder to receive those for information, please? Councillor Ropp and Councillor Mayhew. All opposed? And that's carried. Any inquiries? Councillor Mayhew.
Thank you, Madam Warden. Madam Warden, in the past, there has been discussion, just modest discussion and informal discussion on SWIFT in regard to a letter of intent for guarantee a significant amount of money. I think it was around $750,000 or $780,000. And generally with conversation related to finance and letters of intent and guarantees, there's generally some boundaries of time. It's a significant amount of money. As I see, SWIFT today has seemed to have morphed into a more effective body. And before I make that decision, you know, I need more information, fellow councillors, on that. And I'm just wondering if there could be some deputation from SWIFT that could present their case and their need for this guarantee that they are waiting for, and we have not dealt with yet, primarily because perhaps we all need more information. Who the best spokesperson of that would be, I put this as a question: would Barry Field of SWIFT, a director or ex-director of SWIFT, could present to County Council the motive behind their appeal, what urgency there are, and particularly from my point of view, when I put forth money, I'd like to know what my return on investment is. And that is my primary concern for trying to acquire more information to make a more intellectual decision as to how this benefits our municipalities. No matter what research we do, all of us, there's a significant need for conductivity in Middlesex County on the last mile, these outreaches. And I require more information, and I know that this is on our subject, and I am also concerned about the timelines on this too. Generally with finances, in my background, there is generally timelines associated with them. And would it be possible, Madam Warden, to have a deputation from SWIFT to give us an objective and informative opinion behind this request?
All right, Bill, I think that you have some thoughts on this.
Well, I can answer that as fast or as slow as you want, but the answer is yes. We'll invite Barry to do what you requested, Alan, at the next meeting, which, Joanne, we were talking about that yesterday. I think We've already sort of teed that up for September. Is that right? Can you give me a head nod on that one? Yeah. Okay. So, but just to give you the slower version, Alan, Council, just back you up in time, Council has an agreement with SWIFT that I'm bound by. And that agreement was a very good agreement for Middlesex. And it laid out a whole bunch of parameters for how things were to develop. We now know that SWIFT isn't able to meet that agreement, and for a variety of reasons, but they're not able to meet that agreement. What they've asked us to do now is they've asked us to guarantee financially and put money aside for a period of time to cover the costs associated with the build out as a guarantee for the financing of that. Now, there's two ways that what SWIFT wants to do doesn't meet our agreement. The first is what I just said. Council has committed to, in the agreement, if SWIFT does X, they will get paid Y. The payment amount is still going to be the same, but I don't have any authority from council to put aside more money for this guarantee of the work that is going to be funded by the province. Now, the other way it differs is that we drew circles on a map and said, we're going to pay you if you do work in these areas. Now, SWIFT's not in a position to say that the work will be strictly done within those circles. There will be a component percentage of the RFP that will benefit underserviced areas, but I can't tell you today what SWIFT is going to do in terms of work. What I can tell you, because you made a good point about your return on investment, the only guarantee you can have before the RFPs go out is that they're going to multiply the amount of money that you put in by a factor. I think it's 10. Joanne, is that the number? It's in my head. Is 10?
Well,
it used to be.
I can't say the number.
We can't say the number.
I believe the number that we began with was about 3.5, almost 4.
Right. But they're going to have a multiplier of that, Alan, beyond what our contribution is. But a lot has changed in terms of since the time we put that agreement in place. And so it's significantly different than what council agreed to. So in September, what I'd like to do is have Barry come and explain why it's different, what safeguards he can put in place for council, and ask council for what he needs, because I only have authority for what your agreement says, and there's two major places that are different between what he needs now and what I have in terms of authority. I hope that's helpful.
Okay, just one
follow-up. Yep.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Warden. One follow-up question. Bill, you've obviously had experience with the province being slow to announce funding in many parameters of our governance. Are SWIFT in that same position at this point in time? Like, is the province delaying information, or perhaps Joanne can answer that if Bill can? Like, is there a delay in communications of funding to SWIFT from the province, or do they know what their allocations are going to be?
As far as I can see, there hasn't been a delay in the funding. What the request for the letter of intent was for, what is meant to do, is when we have the RFP go out and the work starts, because of the construction legislation, they need to be paid within 28 days. I think 28 days is the number. The province, however, their payment to our invoices takes longer. And that's the gap. That's why they need all the 14 communities in the next phase to put a letter of intent forward so that SWIFT can get a loan to pay that gap. But that money will all be coming from the province. It's just that there's a gap because of the timing of the two particular, and Barry can explain all of that. I'm doing it as fast as I can, but there's a gap there, and that's what they need the letter of intent for, so that a bank can cover those funds.
It sounds like bridge financing. Yeah.
It's very much bridge finance. And I think if there was ever a delay in provincial funding, it wasn't recently. It was more a few years ago, whenever the change in government happened, because there was a review of the entire program. So the program's been in place a long time in our history, and is getting funded now fully by the province. But there was a review period that happened whenever when there was a government change, and now they're full speed ahead again.
If I could, just as a real positive, the first two phases are well in process, and first people have hooked up. So it's rolling and it's moving in the right direction. So I'm hopeful that this will work out for Middlesex County as well.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Mayhew. Any other inquiries? Okay. Just a reminder that AMO begins on Monday, and I know I've reached out to all of you that I think have registered through the county, and we'll look forward to an interesting conference, that's for sure, but it'll be good to get together and try to experience it as best we can. Our next council meeting is Tuesday, September 8th, and the banquet, of course, in November. With that, a motion to adjourn at 2:31. Mover and seconder, Councillor Vanderheyden and Councillor Richards. All opposed? And that's carried. Thank you very much.
Don't leave.